last episode, the Nashville Sound reached the tippity top of the NBA mountaintop for the first time in their history, winning their first championship with a 4-0 sweep of the San Antonio Spurs, capping off a 16-2 playoff run, despite what I think was honestly probably about as hard of a run as they could have had. I mean, maybe substituting out this Cleveland series for a Milwaukee rematch or a Charlotte, matchup, but these guys both lost in 5 games in round 1, and Cleveland honestly might have given us the hardest challenge in this playoff run, despite me maybe being the most confident heading into that series than any of the others. Either way, it took us no more than 5 games to beat every single one of our opponents, and that was really on the back of Sidney Lowry, who had a historic playoff run, averaging 44.7 points per game in the postseason, breaking the record for a single playoff run previously held by the great Michael Jordan. And it was just a pure joy watching him dominate these playoffs, and added 7 assists on top of it, a few rebounds. Was just the mega superstar that we were hoping we would select when we took him with the first pick of this franchise series, getting lucky, winning our first ever lottery, and it paid off for us in a big way. Another guy who paid off in a big way was Malachi Pope, who really stepped it up in the playoffs. He earned an expanded role and took advantage of it, going from a 14-8 player in the regular season to a 23-10 player in these playoffs, really taking the reins for that second scoring option. There were times in the regular season where we thought maybe Francis Mullins would be our second offensive option, and he certainly flashes abilities to be that at times, but Pope in this playoff run really, I think, took that role over. That being said, despite maybe not getting a massive boost offensively in the playoffs, I was really impressed with Mullins' abilities defensively, and I know that his matchup was often the guy that was having the best game on the other team, but he was really faced with probably the worst gauntlet of center matchups you could possibly ask for those last 3 rounds, and I think he held up extremely well. One big thing is the other team's number 1 could never keep pace with Sidney Lowry, and that's a big thing in the playoffs. Whoever's got the number 1 that's more productive, that team often wins the games, and so Francis Mullins was a good piece in ensuring that Sidney Lowry was always coming on top of the other team's number 1 option. I mean, Sidney made it very difficult for the other team's number 1 to keep up with him as well, but I think Mullins played a role. Also, I think those guys kind of feasted a bit on AC Stevens when he was on the court. You'd always see the opposing team's big man get a lot of production whenever we had AC on. So no slight to AC, but I think that kind of just helps cement just how good Mullins was defensively. You could definitely see a big increase in difficulty in scoring when Mullins was the big man on the court for us. 2.2 blocks, 1.4 steals, and that just doesn't tell the full story of how good I think he was defensively. And that being said, he was still a productive offensive player, averaging 16.4, number 3 on the team. And year 5 really closed what in my mind was the first chapter of this series, and that's going to be, the main chapter. And that chapter was building this team from an expansion team with no hope into a franchise contender using nothing but the NBA draft. And now, starting with this offseason, we enter chapter 2, which is going to be focusing on how long we can keep this championship window open, because as young and impressive as this team is, they are all on their rookie deal. The only player not on a rookie deal in our rotation is Moses Moody, the only one. And so all these guys are going to be wanting more money than they're getting paid right now with their next contract. That starts with Sidney Lowry, who will be handing out a massive contract to this offseason. And next year, we've got Andre Stevens, Christian Davidson, who are going to want contracts. We have the following year, Malachi Pope and Francis Mullins. We're not going to be able to afford everybody. So how do we work it out that we can try to keep this championship window open? And I think the key to that is finding out who the players that you're going to prioritize are. And to do that, I've separated kind of our rotation into 3 tiers. And the first tier of that is our core. These are the guys that I think are essential to have to keep our championship window open. And that consists of 3 players. And I know there might be some of you out there who would put more than 3, but honestly, I think there are only 3 players essential to our franchise being a championship contender. And we've already talked about them to start this episode. So let's hop into the second tier, which I'm going to name the valuable role players. These players are guys that may not be essential to our success, but they'll be very hard to replace if we need to replace them. Starting with Andre Stevens, who is our number 4 option in my mind on this team. I think in most other circumstances, he'd be a 3, maybe on a more successful team, and a 2, maybe on a less successful team. And so he's taking a little bit of a role nerf to be on this championship level team. How long will he be happy with that? I think if we can keep him paid, then he will be happy. If you take a look here at his contract demands, if you go into the contract sliders in NBA 2K, you can see what a player will be projected to demand. And he's going to want $33 million per season on his next contract. Giving that kind of contract out to a guy who projects to be your number 4 option is pretty tough. But let's go back and talk about the next guy on this list, Christian Davidson. I mean, just an absolute shot hunter, microwave scorer off the bench for us in this playoff run. I mean, just look at last episode and how important he was for us sealing the deal on this championship run. He can absolutely turn things on. Is he going to be content being a bench player forever? I think it's a tough starting lineup to crack here on this team. And he does have that A+ potential, though. I don't know if he's going to be happy in Nashville forever. Looking at his contract demands, he's going to want $37 million on his next contract. That's a lot of money. And I think, honestly, we're going to have to choose between Christian Davidson and Andre Stevens. These guys both have 1 year left on their deals heading into next year. And, you know, if we're planning on giving Sidney Lowry the bag this offseason, we're planning on giving Mullins and Pope their bags because they're the core players in 2 off seasons. Well, I guess technically 3 off seasons. Next off season will be Christian Davidson and Andre Stevens' time, but we can't afford them all. So, do we go into this off season and maybe get ahead of the curve and try to replace one of these guys now? Or do we try to keep a team together that just won the NBA championship for 1 more year? I think that's the first important question that we need to answer here in Chapter 2 of this franchise. And then the last guy that I've placed in this tier is Lamond Powers. I think you could argue for him being in the next tier. I don't know if this skill set is super hard to replace. You're talking about a guy with B perimeter defense, B 3-point scoring. I feel like that's not super hard to replicate through the draft, but his combination of athleticism, IQ, and tendencies, I think, make him an excellent fit as that fifth starter. It's a reason that I liked Moses Moody in that role for a very long time, and it's the reason that I like Powers in it now. They just don't take bad shots. When you have better players ahead of you in the starting lineup, I don't want you taking bad shots. It's a reason that I've really liked Christian Davidson in that 6-man role, because he will take some of those shots that you just wish he wouldn't. And so I think, again, that combination of IQ, athleticism, and tendencies put him in the harder to replace role than the next tier, which we'll talk about now, which consists of kind of our last 3 players in our rotation, and that is the expendable role players. Good guys. I really like all these guys, honestly, but I don't think it'll be super hard to replace their production. Moses Moody would be in the valuable role players up until maybe this postseason run, where we just saw his production really fall off a cliff. That being said, he's a guy who's not going to expect a ton of money going forward, and that's going to be a really big deal. Looking at his expected contract, with his next one, he won't even be expected to get $10 million. So I like that. I want guys that aren't going to be asking for very much money on their next contract, and Moses Moody does fit that bill. Plays great defense, hits open shots, doesn't take bad shots. That's a good combination. So he's kind of on that borderline, kind of with Powers, between the valuable role players and the expendable ones. Next up on the list would be Ernest Augustine. Now, he certainly has himself some good moments. It's just a matter of how much is this guy going to want, because he's another guy that has a little bit of potential about him, and we'll see come the player progression screen if anybody's potential changes. But as of right now, he's expecting $20 million on his next contract. There's no way we can pay that to Ernest Augustine, so hopefully that comes down by the time his contract is up. He's another guy that will be asking for a new contract pretty soon, so it's not this offseason, but it's right around the corner. And then the last guy from our rotation is AC Stevens. We saw him get bullied a little bit defensively in the playoffs, but he was asked to guard some of the league's best, and he's a backup center. Backup center, I will say, is a very replaceable position. However, AC Stevens not asking for a lot of money on this next contract, which is again a big deal. That being said, is this a role that's unimportant enough that we could just draft it and take a rookie salary with us along the way? I think that's certainly a possibility, but it would have to be somebody that we get a little bit later in the draft. I mean, let's just take, for example, Lamont Powers here, who we just took in the number 10 slot in this last class. Taking a look at his salaries, they're really close to what AC Stevens is going to be asking for. And so in order to actually save that much money, it would have to be somebody that you get later in the class. If you spend a top 10 pick on that player, you're not going to really be saving all that much money. So now that we've kind of broken down what I think of this team, we know how to prioritize what. The big question again this offseason becomes, do we decide to move off of one of Andre Stevens or Christian Davidson now and try to find their replacements, or do we keep this team together for one more year? So kicking off now the offseason, we've got a massive retirement class here, by far the biggest we have seen so far in this franchise series. I mean, Kevin Durant at the top, Drew Holiday, a good player, kind of almost seems insignificant in a class when he's surrounded by Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, our two main mentors, Draymond Green and Klay Thompson. So the big four from those really unbeatable Golden State Warriors teams, or nearly unbeatable at least, all retired together. And, Clay and Draymond retire with that ring, as does CJ McCollum, who, unless he won one in simulation, should be his first ring. Then a lot of valuable role players down the board as well, but my goodness, the class at the top of this retirement screen was really big. Staff retirements, not nearly as many big names going around. So looking now at the Hall of Fame inductees, not quite as big of a list as I would have expected here. Only 4 players make it: KD, Steph, Jimmy, and Paul George. So no Clay or Draymond. Be interested to see if this retirement class all retire together, how many of them would make the Hall of Fame. I would guess more than 4, though, if I'm being honest. 4 players to get their jerseys retired. Only the Golden State Warriors guys here. No Jimmy Butler, who is a Hall of Famer. And Kevin Durant actually doesn't even get it retired by the Warriors, only the Thunder, the team he played with for the first 10 years of his career. But a legendary Golden State team. I think they deserve to have their jerseys retired by their teams for sure. I mean, the fact that these 4 guys played together for a stint is just absolutely wild, man. League meetings here up next on our agenda here. We see... I'm glad they rejected shot clock to 35 seconds. I would have reverted that had they approved it. The one thing that wasn't approved was opposing teams will enter the bonus after 4 fouls. I don't like that. So I think I'll override this time. Although, honestly, the game does need to simulate more free throws, so I think we might actually let this one slide. I don't love a bonus after only 4 fouls, but it will up the free throws, which is something that my sliders just haven't been able to quite replicate. We're 6 years into a franchise. Why not experiment a little, is what I say. So now we go to the draft lottery here, and we do not have a horse in this race, so I think we'll just allow it to simulate here. Now, I did forget we changed the lottery odds, so the number 1 team does have an increased chance, and they get it here. The Wizards win the Edmund Sampson draft, the one guy that I have previewed in the draft thus far, and he looks like he'll be a Wizard. Maybe not the most fun outcome. I think the Clippers, who just made it to the conference finals, getting him would have been insane. I don't know if that Utah pick had any protections on it, though, but I imagine not, with the Clippers still retaining it at number 3. So this is what the lottery is going to look like here. And we have picks 19 and 32 officially. We weren't in the lottery. We were going to have those picks regardless. We'll get to the draft preview once I get my staff signed here. Coming back, we would get our staff situation handled. We've got a full coaching staff here, retaining both Ham and Snyder, of course, as the top spots. And overall, we have a 4.5-star coaching staff, about as good as it gets in the league. Coaching is our priority as we are trying to win championships here. That does take away from our scouting. We only have 2 guys here, and they're both on 1-year contracts. The draft may be more important as we go along. Just depends on how many spots we're going to need to replace as the years go along. Already previewed it, but guys are going to want to be paid more than we're going to be able to pay them, so we're going to be losing some guys in the near future. For our staff, I'm really focused on stamina and fatigue. We're playing late into these seasons, and we're playing these guys lots of minutes. We want their stamina up, and this is what we had last year, and it allowed our guys to play really big minutes, particularly Lowry and Pope, playing 40 minutes a game those last 2 series. That's going to be a main priority for my medical staff, really for the remainder of this franchise, and we've got everyone locked up for at least the next 2 seasons there. And the front office, not much change. But overall, I think we have a really good staff heading into year 6. Now it's time to take a look at the draft. And as we go along kind of in this second chapter of this series, we're going to be spending a lot less time focusing on the draft, I think, just because we're going to be going through seasons very quickly, and thus I can't, come up with the clips. Those do take time, and I need the time to make them. I think we're kind of just in the tail end of this series, and so I'm not going to be putting all the time needed to make those clips. I'm still obviously going to be paying attention to the draft, trying to find players that could fill roles, especially as we might be losing guys. So with that being said, here in year 6, there are 3 potential roles that I'm looking to maybe replace here, and that is number 1. Can we get a guy who could eventually replace Christian Davidson as a combo guard off the bench? Number 2, can we find a guy who could eventually replace Andre Stevens, kind of the jack of all trades, good athlete, big man in that front court spot next to Mullins? And can we find maybe a cheap option that we could select at number 32 to eventually be a backup center over AC Stevens? Maybe save us a little bit of cap space there. Every little bit of cap space matters here in this franchise. And one thing that'll kind of change about our draft philosophy here is that we're not going to be really looking for players with that high of potential anymore. We're going to be more focusing on guys with low ceilings, which seems counterintuitive as we take our first look here at Irvin Saunders. He's going to go way ahead of our pick. Just want to preview him as one of the top players in the class. Very good offensive player, solid defender as well, solid size. But I want the low ceiling because those guys are going to ask for less on their second contract. And at this point in the franchise, that's really important. Ernest Augustine is asking for $20 million because he has high potential. And I just don't want guys like that anymore. So I'm looking for more ready now contributors who maybe don't have quite as high potential, who are going to be content being bench players the rest of their career. In terms of point guards, there's really only one guy in this class who you could even consider for the Sound, and that is Antonis we're going to call him Patsy for now. If I draft him, I'll figure out how to pronounce that last name, but I don't think we'll probably draft him. One thing we look for is size. The smallest guy in our rotation is currently Christian Davidson at 6'5". So, we look for size. Antonis is really the only guy with size. It's just not a skill set I love. He can play make, can't really defend, can't really shoot. He can score inside a bit. He's got good IQ and physicals, which I do like as well. Just not quite the two-way impact that I typically look for. And if that's our best option at point guard, you gotta just think point guard is not gonna be something that we really target here in this class. Could we find a 2-guard though that can play a little bit of point guard? And on the contrary, I love this shooting guard class, starting with the number 1 overall prospect, Edmund Sampson here. Just absolutely the Sidney Lowry build. 82 overall. He actually is a better shooter right off the rip than Lowry was. I think he started with A-. Sampson already has that at A+. A+ perimeter defense, B playmaking, good IQ, insane physicals, insane potential. 13 badges. You really can't say enough about Edmund Sampson. He's one of the best players to come out in the draft, if not maybe even the best in this series. He's going to be insane for the Washington Wizards unless they mess it up and pick somebody else. It would be kind of hilarious, but I don't imagine it'll happen. Cliff Bird here up next. He's one of the 2 guards that I think we have at least a shot at. It might require a slight trade up to get him. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to start at 77 overall here. 6'5", a listed 6'10" wingspan. Can shoot from the mid-range decently well, at least solid from the three-point as well, but he is really a high-caliber defender, an absolute dog on the defensive end. Has B+ potential, which is just weird to say it, but maybe a little bit too high for what I'm looking for. I'm kind of looking for that B potential range, honestly. 4 badges with him as well: clamps, midi, pick, dodger, and workhorse. A really good set of badges for a guy to score from the mid-range and to play excellent defense. I think he'd be an excellent pick at 19. Can he play point guard, though, is the question with him, and I don't really think he can. He only has that C playmaking. I wish this guy had some maybe point guard flexibility, because I think he would be a slam dunk caliber pick at 19, could he? Phil Bowman here, another 2-guard. I don't really know if he's going to be a 2-guard for us. Should we draft him? He's 6'7", 240 pounds. This guy can absolutely shoot the cover off the ball. One of, if not the best shooter in this class. Got 5 badges that help him become even a better shooter than his ratings would suggest. So he's got the badge count you look for to start. Got the high overall you look for to start. Defensively, he's solid. I'm not going to wow you anywhere there, but he can defend a little bit both on the perimeter and on the inside, which you like. He has C+ playmaking, which is a little bit higher than Bird's. He has only average IQ, which is still solid, but has low potential. And again, it still feels weird that I'm actually looking for low potential in these guys. But at this point, if I'm looking for a guy that's probably just going to be a bench guy for us, not likely going to be a starter, I don't want them asking for much money on their second contract, and I think Bowman could fit that for sure. Neither of these guys, unfortunately, could fill that Christian Davidson role, I don't think, in terms of being able to play 2-guard and point guard. I think Bowman's honestly more of just a straight-up forward who happened to play 2-guard for Virginia. Bird does have that same all-star ceiling, so they're, boom potential might be similar, but I think the regular potential is lower here for Phil Bowman. There is one guy here, though, in this class that could potentially fill that Christian Davidson role, and that is Mac Pollard. He does have point guard as his secondary position. Another guy who can shoot. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. That's kind of the minimum height that I like, that 6'5". His playmaking is at B-, so he's a little bit better there. He's got the physicals we look for. IQ is good. He's the worst perimeter defender of the bunch, though, which is concerning. He does have that same all-star ceiling. He also has 4 badges. These are a little bit more kind of herky-jerky. I don't know if they're as good of badges, but still 4 badges is nothing to sneeze at here. And he would fill the role of a potential, at least, Christian Davidson replacement, the kind of guy that can function mostly as a scoring guard, but can maybe play make a bit as well when needed. So I really like all 3 of these options at the 2-guard spot, and I think one of them is going to be a Nashville Sound. Moving on here to the small forward position, we've got some options here. Kenny Jamison is projected to be a top 5 pick here. Just because he's got insane potential. Not that we're going to draft him, but just wanted to highlight him as one of the better players here in the class. Can shoot a bit, can defend a bit, has insane potential. Albert Copeland would maybe be the small forward that you would look at for our team. He's an insane athlete with a really high IQ. Kind of a jack of all trades skill set wise. Good size at 6'7", 220 pounds. He's old. Doesn't have high potential. He doesn't quite have the badges that you want, and he's kind of a small forward, which I don't know if that's really the position that we need, with Moody and Lowry gonna be probably locking down that position for years. Moody can move to 2 as well, but power forward, not exactly my favorite class here. If you're looking for a guy that could eventually take over a spot for an Andre Stevens, I don't know if this is the class to do it. Darrell Ball is a really good interior defender and rebounder, which you have from Andre Stevens. He might be like an Andre Stevens light, a guy who excels from the mid-range offensively, interior defense and rebounding on the other end. Ed Knox here, a guy who maybe under certain circumstances I would be a lot more interested in, because he's got that A potential and he's got a decent starting point as well. Curtis Cunningham, kind of the same deal with him. Both these guys almost kind of like Ernest Augustine replacements, if anything. Maybe I would even say Knox could be a slightly better version of what we drafted in Ernest Augustine. Just a better scorer, but not much to speak of at the power forward spot. Now, center-wise, there are a lot of good centers in this class for sure, especially if you're looking for the older prospect that's already ready to come in and play year 1. My favorite of the bunch is Lonnie McNeil here. He's 7'1" and a whopping 275 pounds. An absolute unit. Great interior defense and rebounding, which is what I want from a backup center. He's got 3 badges on top of it. And just, could provide something different from Francis Mullins with our backup center. If I have one complaint for AC Stevens, it's that he's just kind of a lesser version of Francis Mullins who doesn't shoot threes. The problem with Lonnie McNeil is he's actually going to go pretty early in this class. So we're not, if we, decided to trade up to get him, we're not really saving money over AC Stevens with the drafting of Lonnie McNeil. Stevens asking for $6.5 million is pretty much the same amount of money that we would be getting. One skill set I am intrigued with here is Aid Lawala in terms of a guy that could be available later in the class. Just as a guy who's got a lot of Bs across the board, he can actually shoot a little bit, adding some stretch 5 as our backup. He's got All-Star, which is, again, is kind of the highest ceiling that I want. I don't want above All-Star ceiling here. And just can do a little bit of everything. I do like better rebounding, I must admit, from my center spot, but, I just don't know if you're waiting till 32, you're not going to be able to pick, a perfect prospect. But that's one center I could see taking and perhaps eventually replacing AC Stevens. Randolph Dudley is another option here. He's just not very big. He does have 5 badges. He's 19 years old. Could maybe be available at 19. Not so sure about 32. There are a lot of options. I think we wait until 32 if we still have that pick. We might have to package it with 19 to move up to get one of the 2 guards that I like in this class. And we just wait to see who's there and we take the best among them. I think it will probably be the strategy at that center position. But in terms of guys I would take at 19, I think it would just be Lonnie McNeil, and I just don't think he's going to get there. So likely going to have to wait until 32 or just re-sign Stevens and not draft a center at all in this class. Those are kind of the 2 options that I'm thinking of for this class. And with that preview done, I think we're about ready to hop into the draft itself and see just who we end up with. Welcome officially to the 2028 NBA Draft. Commissioner Adam Silver here to announce the picks. And I recently found out, literally 2 minutes before I started this draft, that Ernest Augustine only had 2 years on his contract. He's actually a restricted free agent this year. I completely spaced that. I was counting on him having 2 more years under contract. So Ernest Augustine wants that $20 million this year. Does that change my draft plans here? I don't know. Like I said, I just found out in real time as I'm recording this draft about 2 minutes ago. And so whether or not that plays an impact, we'll just have to see. Edmund Sampson does go number 1. Again, just absolute slam dunk number 1 pick. Whitaker doesn't know what he's talking about. A contingency plan for Malik Monk? No, this is the centerpiece of a rebuild, man. This has nothing to do with Malik Monk. Irvin Saunders, the point guard we talked about at the very top of the preview, just briefly, but I think a worthy second overall pick here, was always viewed as the second guy in this class. Randall Robertson ends up going number 3 overall to the Clippers. They wanting a little bit of a older prospect who can hopefully provide some early impact for them. Looks to be their strategy here. They were in a game 7, 1 game away from the NBA Finals, so they definitely want somebody to contribute early. The Lakers are trading this pick for Walker Kessler. Okay, the Jazz decide to trade into the top 4 of this class. I wonder who it's for. It's for Sammy Rogers. Don't know if I love that as a Jazz fan. Feel like just keep Walker Kessler. Sammy Rogers you just hope turns into Walker Kessler. I don't know. Kenny Jamison goes next to the Nets. They had picks 2 and 5, and I think they did a good job with them for sure, getting a couple of the consensus best players in this class. Getting a guard and a wing, both with substantial upside. Phoenix Suns are up next. They go Ed Knox here. This was the one kind of long-term power forward that I was actually a pretty big fan of. Did not think he would go all the way up here at number 6, but I think the Suns definitely need to turn a page. You know, these aren't the Suns that we know in real life. Lonnie McNeil goes to the Pacers, and that is annoying. They already have Darren Anthony, and now they have 7'1", 275-pound Lonnie McNeil to back him up. Oh my gosh. I think that's probably going to be a wasted pick there by Sacramento. 5'9" just rarely pans out at the NBA level, especially in 2K. Boyd Quinn, another undersized guard here, but at least he, cracks the 6 foot. He's still, at 6 foot, you need to be really good to make it. Albert Copeland here ends up going at number 10, so he's off the board for us. Wasn't at the top of my board, but he's certainly probably top 5 for guys that I was hoping could fall to 19. The Blazers, another team that have been perennial playoff teams for the last several years, ever since they added Jamal Murray to be their backup point guard. And they're looking for early contributors. That's exactly what he brings. The Bulls trade number 11 for Kyle Kuzma and select Daryl Powers, the Kings will, who traded Kyle Kuzma for the right to select him. Willie Hicks here goes at number 12 to the Detroit Pistons. And so far, none of our 2 guards have been selected, which is really good. We are getting to the point in the draft where I want to just see where they're at and where they're projected, because I don't want to lose out on these guys. This is maybe a chance for a cheap trade up for us at this point. So if we go, starting here with Cliff Bird, he has not been selected here, as we well know. Projected 14, 12, and 4. He probably goes off the board for us. Phil Bowman would be available in 2 of the 3 mock drafts, and the same is for Mac Pollard. So I feel pretty good about one of them making it through the next 6 or so picks. If you wanted to trade up, Cliff Bird would probably be the guy you do it for. He does offer a skill set that we just don't quite have in terms of that defensive specialist. That's one skill set that just never ended up being number 1 on the board for me. Could be fun here if he could play point guard. If I felt like he could play point guard, it would certainly be it. Phil Bowman, I think, is a better fit, especially because I think he can play a lot of forward. And if we are missing out on Ernest Augustine, a guy who I was banking on being part of the team next year, Phil Bowman, I think, helps fill that potential role, while Mac Pollard, I think, could eventually replace Christian Davidson. So while I really like Cliff Bird, I think the other two guards maybe fit our team better. So I think we just go to 19 and see who's there. Robert Roy out of Utah State goes here at 15. One of the last picks in the lottery. And from my alma mater. So, I mean, we're getting to the point of the draft where trading up seems pretty dang cheap. I mean, if Brandon Clark's getting it to you, then I think we're at a cheap point in the draft. The Jazz have just completely redone their center rotation in this draft. Interesting strategy. Another center here goes ahead of our pick, and so we're going to have our pick of the litter here at number 19 as to which of these 2 guards that we want to take. I really like Bird, I really like Bowman, I really like Pollard. I think Pollard fills perhaps the most important role that we might need to replace of these guys. We end up not retaining Christian Davidson. Finding somebody that can replace him is essential. Bowman and Bird offer great day 1 skill sets. I think they're higher overalls. I think their badges are better as well. So who do you select of the three? I was hoping that 2K would make the decision easier for me here by taking one or two of them off the board, but we get our pick of my three favorite players that I thought we could take in 19. And with the 19th pick in the 2028 NBA draft, the Nashville Sounds will select Phil Bowman, forward out of Virginia. Played two guard in college, but that's not what he's going to play for us most likely. Ultimately, learning just before the draft that Ernest Augustine might be off the team next year certainly influenced this pick. I mean, he's 6'7", 240 pounds. His interior defense is just as good as his perimeter defense. I think this is a guy that, for us combos, to be more of a combo forward, than a two guard. And he's also the only other guy other than Samson that I got clips for in this class, and so that gave him a little bit extra boost so we could actually get clips for our draft pick. But I think this is going to be a solid pick for us. Fills a need, and I think offers that combination of ready now ability without a ton of upside. Again, it just feels really weird saying that that's what I'm looking for, but it truly is. And that guy saying that this has anything to do with Sidney Lowry's free agency is a nut bar. So let's continue on here through the draft. We'll start to go pretty quickly here, as a lot of these guys I don't really know. I'm interested to see where guys like Pollard and Bird go here most of all. 27, we have a trade to announce. And oh my, the Pacers are getting better. They're sending their top three protected first round pick in 2030 and 27 overall for Julius Randle. The Pacers getting, I think, a lot better here in this draft, and they were already one of our top threats in the association. Their front court is getting quite crowded now. I think you gotta imagine that a Miles Turner trade is coming for this Pacers squad. And then the Knicks take Cliff Bird. Was honestly kind of hoping he'd slide to 32. I would have taken him for sure at that point and just seen if the point guard thing can work. Apparently he had a back issue according to that comment though. So I want to see if we can trade up to 29. If we can take Mac Pollard here, I absolutely will. I do want to look at our alternate options though to see if we should trade up. I want to see who's available at center, really, as well. But Mac Pollard, I mean, if we could trade for him, I think that's got to be our best option, right? Just want to make sure that I haven't missed him. He hasn't gone. Yeah, he's still available. Can't imagine the trade up would be very difficult here. Of 4 spots, how many future seconds do we have? But again, I do want to take a quick look here at the centers to see who hasn't gone. Top guy is Abe Lawal, who I did preview as somebody that I thought had an intriguing skill set. He's another guy who's just really big at 263 pounds, something we don't really have much on our roster. I'd be fine taking him at 32 as well, so maybe you don't need to trade up here for Mac Pollard. It's interesting. I think you gotta imagine there's a good chance one of them's available at 32. But do you like Mac Pollard over Abe Lawal enough to try and make the trade? I think we just hope that both are there. I would take Pollard over Lawal, and he goes here at 29. So now with only one player left that I'm really interested in, now I think you see if we can move up just a couple of spots here. We only have 1 second. That's 4 years down the road. That's pretty much useless in the eyes of NBA teams, but we'll see. here if the Hawks will take it. Technically adds up. 2 half stars for a star. Says no. Not going to override it. I don't even know I have that on. Probably from the last trade deadline, honestly. So I could force some CPU trades. But now we just got to hope that we can draft Lawal, and we can. Here, not much in the way of drama. I don't have any clips for him, unfortunately. But Abe Lawal, what he does is he just gives us some optionality. Now we're not forced into retaining AC Stevens if we don't want to. I also don't think Abe Lawal is so good that you just say no to AC Stevens altogether. What it does, like I said, it adds the optionality, which I like. I like flexibility, not being forced into doing one thing or the other in this free agency. We've got 3 guys with expiring contracts: AC Stevens, Ernest Augustine, and Sidney Lowry. We're obviously bringing Sidney back at the max, but the other 2 guys now, if we end up not being able to retain them, we have plans in place. Edmund Sampson ends up being everything he was projected to be. 13 badges, insane player, A+ potential, has everything that the Wizards want, and maybe this can turn this franchise around. They've certainly had their struggles throughout the years, and that's continued here in this franchise. Saunders a solid pick there at number 2. Lonnie McNeil ends up with B+ potential, for the Pacers. So yeah, they got themselves a sick center rotation, and you gotta imagine Miles Turner is on the move here. And 77 pretty good for Copeland here. 77 good for Roy on the Nuggets. But you really want to see what we got in our player. Phil Bowman here, just as good of a shooter. Pretty much everything accurately projected on him. And then, of course, you get the B potential, which you like, the 5 badges as well. This is the kind of guy that I was hoping we would get at 19. He's exactly the player that I thought we were going to be drafting. So I like that pickup there for us. And I want to take a look at the other 2 guards that we had the option to take. Cliff Bird here. Again, pretty much exactly what he was projected to be. Heading into the drafts, got those 4 badges. Those were all accurately depicted as well. So I like Cliff Bird. He ends up coming in at just a 76, though. He was projected at a 77. Between those 2, it's hard to say who's going to be the best, if I'm being honest. And of course, I also would like to take a look at Pollard, who we missed out on. I mean, we saw that the trade up probably wouldn't have worked without giving up a future first anyway for this guy, but another guy very accurately depicted by his pre-draft scouting report, only B potential. The guy that, probably a career bench guy, but that's exactly what we're looking for. Now, Abe Lawal, our pick at 32. Comes in at 73. And another guy, surprise, surprise, comes in exactly as projected. He does have A- potential, though. Oh, boy. So, we'll see about that. He does have some room to improve, only starting at 73 overall, though. So, I guess potential is not the worst with him. And again, kind of as I was saying with AC Stevens, backup center seems to be a fairly replaceable spot. So, if we get him for his 4 years on his rookie deal, that might just be good for me. Overall, I think the draft was fairly successful. I would have loved to have gotten Pollard, but Lawal, just taking a look at it, he's going to make less over the next 2 years than AC Stevens is asking for this year. So a cheaper option at backup center was exactly what I wanted, and we have the chance at it here. Player options, we're going to accept everybody. Everyone was easy except for maybe James here. You could argue to decline his $6 million, but he's got some potential about him. Want to see how he improves from year 1 to year 2. So we'll keep him for this next year, I suppose. Probably just going to be a guy that plays another year at the G League. He's not going to like that, and he's not going to resign afterwards. But who knows? Maybe somebody gets injured and he gets some times with the big league squad this year. And so now in free agency, I'm going to first offer a 1+1 with a team year option, flat $6.5 million for AC Stevens. I think Lawal, kind of like I said it before, isn't so good that you just say, yep, he's our backup center, no questions asked. I think you at least got to give AC Stevens another year here. Give Lawal a chance to maybe develop at the G League for a year. And then depending on what we see about his ratings, we can accept or decline that second year from AC Stevens. Just increasing even further the optionality at that backup center spot with a 1+1. We'll see if that's enough to retain him. I imagine it will be. In terms of Ernest Augustine, I think we're just going to hope he accepts the qualifying offer from us. Or we'll just maybe match depending on what another team offers him later on in free agency. He might not get an offer at all. I mean, look at his expected value compared to everyone around him. They're averaging around $8 million per. Now the difference, of course, is Ernest Augustine has much higher potential than those guys, but still, 22. I have a hard time believing he's going to get that offer from a team. So hopefully he'll just accept that qualifying offer. Sidney Lowry, we're going to give him the 5-year max. I'm going to not add the player option. I want him to make sure he's on the team for all 5 of those years. He was happy getting like $5 million less per year than this, but there's no way I'm going to try to cheapskate our way out of signing what is ultimately one of the best players in all of basketball. I'm giving him the full shebang, and he should accept this. I'm really hoping we don't have to match an offer that's like a 3+1. That would be annoying. I want him secured for 5 years, not for just 3, because he's probably going to reject that player option. And ultimately, 2 days into moratorium, we get both AC Stevens and Sidney Lowry to agree to their contracts. Ernest Augustine will keep as a cap hold. Everybody else we're announcing. Maybe bringing back Kevon Looney or Nerlens Noel as a potential mentor, but I'm certainly going to try to look to see if we can't find anybody better before I commit to those guys being our mentors for the season. And here we are, a few days into free agency. I have found our mentors. James Harden, definitely the biggest name of our mentors here, still has 27 badges. That will go down, of course, once we get to player regression, but at 27, you still got to imagine he's going to have a wide variety to choose from Malachi Pope or somebody else. Rudy Gobert still with 11 badges, and a lot of them high-level badges I think will be a good mentor for a big man. And then Jeremy Grant just kind of, I think, was the best of the options available. He can find a forward to mentor somewhere in our team. And yep, these 3 are going to be our mentors for the year. Also going to sign a 2-way guy here. Just quickly, this should be our last contract. So at this point, it's now just taking a look at what happened around the league, because it was a big free agency. Here we are on day 12, and Taylor Hendricks is the top guy who's unsigned. Still don't know why he has no offers, especially because Sohan below him has 10, and they're pretty similar players. Expecting pretty similar values. You'd think maybe a couple of those guys who are going to lose on Sohan would just tilt over and offer Hendricks instead. This is better than it has been in past years in terms of guys unsigned on day 12. I increased in the sliders for the contracts, the cap inflation all the way up to the max. I think it's made some impact, but maybe not quite as much as we need, as we see Dino Ranchich down here. But maybe we add a couple more expansion teams to add some roster slots next offseason. That could be a fun twist. But also force us to protect some guys and leave some others unprotected, which could be a fun twist as well. But overall, going in the right direction, still maybe just not quite where I want to be in the last day of free agency in terms of guys who still haven't signed. But let's tilt over to the guys who have signed. And the list is long. Jokic and Wemby each going back. It looks like Wemby, the situation was a match because that looks like a 3+1 to me. So Wembanyama back to the Spurs though. Lowry, of course, signed the massive 5-year deal. Darren Anthony also looks like a match situation, so that's a win for us. He's only guaranteed to be with the Pacers for 3 more years. Devin Booker, big deal to return to the Suns at age 31. Ja Morant headed to Oklahoma City for nearly $56 a year. The Knicks snag Zion Williamson. Cavs retain Evan Mobley here. Jalen Green going from Seattle to Dallas in his age 26 season. A big get for the Mavericks. Garland retained by the Cavs. The Lakers retaining Donovan Mitchell. The Knicks also get Barnes. They signed 2 high-level power forwards who aren't known for their shooting. I like each of those signings individually. I don't know how they fit together, though, for New York. The Sonics trying to recoup some value, but they lose Şengün. They lose Scotty Barnes, and they lose Jalen Green. That was honestly, a very sick offseason. I think I would claim them the winners of that second offseason, grabbing 3 restricted free agents and just completely reshaping their team. But after those contracts ended, they lose every single one of them. Montgomery, the 3rd pick in our first draft, retained by the Rockets. And Claxton to the Kings. Anthony Black gonna play point guard for the Suns. And now we're just getting to the point where these guys are more just solid starters, so we'll just go through them quickly here. Overall, a lot of players that were pretty good in free agency. Despite all these retirements, there were still a lot of good players to be had. Most of them retained by their teams, though. The Knicks making aggressive moves, but will they pay off? I don't know if I love the fit of their 2 big-time acquisitions. Ernest Augustine accepts the qualifying offer, so he's back for 1 more year, which means all 9 players from the championship rotation are back with the team. We're running it back and trying to repeat here in our next season. And so here's a look at our rotation. Oh, I think I'm getting a little bit of a preview here of the progression screen because these are not the overalls I'm familiar with. Like Davidson's up to an 84 overall now. I don't remember that being the case. So overall, I think we've got ourselves a pretty solid roster. And of course, we kept it together, which didn't know if that was going to be the case. And I think the mentors, we were able to pivot well from having insane mentors last year to picking up a couple of really good ones this year. And I think we've got to be the favorites to repeat again. And that's without even looking at this player progression screen, which we're going to look at right now. And here you have it. Malachi Pope up to 87 overall and Davidson up to 84. The kind of the things that jump out quickly here. Lowry, I don't think gained any badges. I believe he had 35 last year. He's at a 95 overall. Malachi up to 26 badges. 26. What did he have? Was it 15? Plus 11? Was it even 15? It might have been lower than that. Wow. A massive boost for Malachi Pope. Francis Mullins only up to 11. Not quite as big of an upgrade here, but he's still obviously a stud. His 3 points up to A-, which is a pretty big boost. Would love to have inside defense up to A+ with him, but unfortunately don't get lucky there. And his potential is A-, while Malachi Pope's goes up to A. Christian Davidson's goes down to A, but the fact that he's been able to retain his potential through all of this is really insane. His playmaking's in the A, his perimeter defense is in the A's, his inside defense is now at B. I mean, this is absolutely a starting caliber player. No doubt about it. He's up to 13 badges as well. That Christian Davidson versus Andre Stevens, who do we pay? Question is gonna be a tough one for this team. I honestly don't know the answer. Before this offseason, I would have said Andre Stevens, but Christian Davidson retaining his potential and getting some nice upgrades. Man, it's gonna be a tough decision next offseason of which one we decide to keep. Man. Ernest Augustine gets up to 78 overall. He has 4 badges. Interior defense up to A-. Perimeter defense still just D+ though. Rebounding's in the A's. His IQ's up to average now. Lamont Powers up to 78 overall. He has 3 badges. He gets catch and shoot and clamps. Those are 2 of the 3 that we had Klay Thompson mentoring him on. So shout out to Klay Thompson for helping Lamont Powers' development. 3 points up to B+, perimeter defense up to B, IQ up to B+. Should be a good player. Is he going to start, though, is the question. Are we going to start Christian Davidson? I mean, oh, that's tough. James up to 73 overall. His potential has been nerfed to B, though, so you have to wonder how much better he's going to get. Still, I think B is like high 70s. But defense into the Bs as well. And of course, we have our mentors who are going down, which is exactly why they'll be riding the bench as mentors this year for our squad. But big takeaway is that 2K absolutely rewarded Malachi Pope for his awesome postseason run there. Big boost. I mean, does he even need the mentorship of James Harden anymore? Should we give it to somebody else? I mean, my goodness. This guy is insane. Didn't even talk about his, grades going up. AQ to max, playmaking to max, inside scoring into the A's. That's really big. Here are the guys that are going to highlight our Summer League team. Still got some interesting players here. Ernest Augustine, Lamont Powers, Phil Bowman, James, and Lawal. All guys who were going to be on our 15-man roster. But we'll allow the CPU to fill out the rest. And I just kind of want to look at the stats at the end. Again, those off-season, Summer League streams, not going to be a part of this franchise anymore. We're really at the tail end of the series, and we're just trying to see how we can defend our one title. It's kind of the goal of the franchise at this point, this deep into it. Didn't want to end with the championship, just winning one, because I feel like our team's ceiling is much higher than that, and I feel like we have some unique challenges in the years to come. We were able to retain everybody this year, but I imagine this is the last year that's going to be the case. 48% from deep from Bowman is pretty nice. We got 12.6 rebounds from Lawal. Shot 52 from the field. Shot well from 3 as well. And getting 11 points here from Ernest Augustine. 8 rebounds. He shot well from deep. And then 38% as well from Powers. Didn't shoot nearly as well from the field, but you know what we got with him, and we're confident he can be a good impact player for us in his second season. Overall, we only won 1 playoff game, I think is what I saw there in the Summer League. Not quite as successful as you want to be, but it's the Summer League. There's only one championship we care about now. Brooklyn to host the next All-Star game. That's sick. Congrats to them. We'll auto-generate our rookies. And this will pretty much wrap up our offseason here ahead of year 6. Just want to take one last look here at some rosters. I mean, we now have 5 players, 84 plus overall. That's just not depth you're going to see anywhere else in the league. And again, I've said it plenty of times already. You're not going to see it for very much longer on this team either, but we're just going to quickly assign our two-way player to the G League before I forget, just in case he does need to play at some point in the season. We want to make sure he has some days available. Might need to do a little bit of shifting of positions around, but my big question is, what do we do with Christian Davidson this year? Do we give him a chance to finally be the full-time starter? See if he can prove that he's more valuable than Andre Stevens, because again, this is probably the season where we have to choose between the two at the end of it. And who ends up being the choice? I thought Andre Stevens was the heavy favorite, but now looking at this player card from Christian Davidson, it's hard not to want him back. Especially the problem I have with him starting, though, is he's our backup point guard. We don't have anybody else that we could play backup point guard. Another team I think had a very interesting offseason is the Indiana Pacers. I think they're probably going to move on from Miles Turner with the addition of McNeil here. Maybe getting themselves a better wing. An upgrade at the wing spot I think would make sense for them. They have Gregor Hammonds, who was just with the Spurs. Played against him in the finals. But the Pacers, I think, added a little bit depth. Got some guys to start for them. The Spurs, Sheldon Starks is up to an 85 overall, retains that A+ potential. Up to 12 badges as well. I think the Spurs, maybe not quite as much depth as they had last year, but I think Sheldon Starks forms a big three that can at least challenge ours for sure. And I think they'll be a main opponent for us once again. Kind of the guys that we face at the very end of the playoffs this year. I see it the very same next year as well. That's all I've got for the off-season episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're excited for Season 6. We'll be going through it pretty quickly. And until then, sound up.